The first thing people noticed about the mountain man was his silence. Not the peaceful kind, not the humble quiet of a man content with the world, but a silence that felt sharpened, like a blade kept hidden beneath a coat. He lived high above the valley where the pines clawed at the sky and the wind never learned how to rest. Folks down in Dry Creek said the mountains swallowed men whole, that it took their names and left only bones and rumors behind. Yet this man lived there year after year, in a cabin built from stubborn hands and grief-hardened wood, staring across the open land as if waiting for the earth itself to confess. No one remembered his real name anymore. Some said he once had a family, others said he had once laughed. But the man who stood beneath God's endless sky now was forged from loss, and whatever had been taken from him had carved something hollow and dangerous inside his chest. The locals called him Elias Crow, though no one knew why. Perhaps it was the way blackbirds followed him at a distance, or the way his eyes seemed to look through men instead of at them. Elias rose before dawn every day, not because he loved the morning, but because sleep brought memories, and memories brought pain. He would step outside his cabin as the world turned blue with early light, breath fogging in the cold air, rifles slung across his back like a burden he could never put down. He spoke to no one, not even to God, though he believed God watched him closely. He could feel it in the way the wind paused when he prayed without words, and in the way the sky stretched endlessly above him, silent and judging. Years ago, though time meant little to him now, Elias had sworn an oath beneath that sky. He had knelt in the dirt, hands trembling, blood still warm on his palms, and he had promised that what was taken would not be forgotten. He promised that justice, or something close enough to it, would come. Not through courts or laws or men in clean coats, but through endurance, patience and iron resolve. He did not ask God to forgive him. He asked God to witness him. The town of Dry Creek lay far below his mountain, a thin scar of civilization pressed into the wilderness. It was a place built on dust and desperation, where men drank to forget and prayed only when they were losing. Elias avoided it whenever he could, but the mountain could not give him everything. Powder, salt, tools, some need still tied him to the world of men. When he rode into town, conversations died like candles snuffed by a sudden wind. People watched him the way prey watches a predator, still and silent, hoping not to be noticed. Children were pulled close. Dogs stopped barking. Even the piano inside the saloon seemed to miss a note when he passed by. Elias never looked at them. He kept his eyes forward, jaw set, boots heavy against the dirt road. He did not come to threaten. He did not come to haunt. He came because survival demanded it, and because fate, like the mountain, could not be avoided forever. On this particular morning, the sky carried a weight Elias hadn't felt in years. Clouds rolled slow and dark over the peaks, heavy with the promise of a storm. He felt it in his bones as he saddled his horse, an old gray mare who trusted him without question. Animals always did. They sensed the brokenness and understood it without fear. He mounted up and took one last look at his cabin, at the rough wooden cross nailed beside the door, before turning toward the long descent into Dry Creek. As he rode, memories surfaced uninvited. A woman's laugh, a small hand gripping his finger, the smell of bread cooling on a windowsill. Each memory was a wound that never healed, only scabbed over enough to keep him breathing. He clenched his jaw and pushed them down. Pain was useful, but nostalgia was poison. Dry Creek appeared slowly, like a regret you couldn't outrun. The saloon stood crooked at the center, its paint peeling like old skin. The sheriff's office leaned beside it, tired and underfunded. Elias dismounted near the general store, tying his horse with practiced knots. Inside, the bell above the door rang once, sharp and accusing. The store owner, a thin man named Walter Finch, stiffened when he saw who had entered. "Morning," Walter said, though his voice lacked conviction. Elias nodded once. He placed a few coins on the counter. "Powder, salt, coffee." Walter moved quickly, not daring to meet his eyes. "Storm's coming," he said, attempting conversation like a man throwing stones at a wall, hoping one might stick. "So it seems," Elias replied. His voice was low, worn like gravel dragged across iron. As Walter wrapped the goods, the door opened again. This time the bell rang twice, lighter, almost hesitant. Elias didn't turn, but he felt it, the shift in the air, the way his instincts sharpened like teeth. The man who entered smelled of trouble and whiskey and worse, of recognition. "Now I'll be damned," the newcomer said, voice thick with mockery. "If it ain't the mountain ghost himself." Elias closed his eyes for half a heartbeat. He knew that voice. It belonged to a past he had buried deep beneath snow and silence. Slowly, deliberately, he turned. The man standing there was older now, heavier, but the eyes were the same, cold, cruel, alive, with the kind of arrogance that comes from believing the world has never truly punished you. His name was Marcus Hale. For a moment the world narrowed to the space between them. Elias felt his pulse thunder in his ears, felt the old oath stir like a sleeping beast. Marcus smiled, unaware or uncaring of the storm he had just stepped into. "Well, I'll be," Marcus continued, tipping his hat. "He does exist." Elias stared at him, eyes dark and steady. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Marcus laughed. "Funny, I was thinking the same about you." Walter stood frozen behind the counter, hands shaking. He could feel it too, the tension thick and suffocating. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a collision. History had claws, and it had just sunk them deep. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Heard you went and hid yourself up in the mountains. Guess even the strong men break." Elias leaned in just enough for Marcus to see the truth in his eyes. "I didn't break," he said. "I remembered." The smile slipped just for a second. And in that second, Marcus knew, truly knew, that whatever he had done all those years ago had not stayed buried. It had grown. It had waited. And now, beneath God's wide and unforgiving sky, it had found him again. Outside, thunder rolled over the mountains, slow and deliberate, like a warning spoken too late. Thunder did not break immediately after Elias spoke. It lingered, stretched thin across the sky like a held breath. Marcus Hale straightened slowly, his earlier confidence rearranging itself into something sharper, more cautious. Men like Marcus survived by sensing danger early, even if they never admitted fear. His eyes flicked once toward the door, then back to Elias, measuring distance. "Wait, consequence." "You always did talk like a preacher," Marcus said, forcing a chuckle. Still pretending the past got teeth. Elias did not answer. He paid Walter, took his supplies, and turned toward the door, as if Marcus were no more than smoke. That indifference cut deeper than any insult. Marcus's jaw tightened. "You walk away now," Marcus said, voice lower. "And maybe we both forget this little reunion." Elias stopped with one hand on the doorframe. He didn't turn around. "Some things don't forget," he said. "They wait." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying dust and the smell of rain. Elias stepped into it, mounted his horse, and rode out of Dry Creek without looking back. But Marcus watched him go, eyes narrowed, something ugly waking behind them. That night the storm came hard. Rain lashed the mountain like punishment, hammering Elias's cabin roof until sleep became impossible. He sat by the fire, rifle across his knees, shadows dancing along the log walls. Marcus Hale's face refused to leave his mind. Time had changed the man's body, but not his soul. Elias knew that look. It was the same look Marcus wore years ago, on the night everything burned. The memory rose fully now, unstoppable. Back then Elias had been a different man, younger, softer, fool, enough to believe distance from cruelty meant safety. His cabin hadn't been alone on the mountain then. There had been laughter in it, light in the windows even after dark. His wife, Clara, had loved the high air, said it made her feel closer to heaven. Their son, Samuel, believed the mountain was alive, that it watched over them like a giant guardian. The night Marcus came, Elias had been late returning from town. He remembered the unease crawling up his spine as he rode home through falling snow. Remembered the way the mountain went quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no wind. When the cabin came into view, the door was open, and firelight spilled where it shouldn't have. Elias dismounted before the horse even stopped, running, heart screaming before his mouth ever could. Inside, chaos. Furniture overturned. Blood smeared across the floor like a signature. Clara lay near the hearth, eyes open, unseeing. Samuel was nowhere. Elias dropped beside his wife, hands shaking. begging God for a miracle he already knew would not come. Clara's fingers were cold, her mouth slightly open, as if she'd tried to call his name. Then he heard it, a sound outside. Not laughter, crying. He ran again, this time into the trees, toward the edge of the clearing. There, tied to a post like an animal, was Samuel, alive, bruised, terrified. And standing before him, torch in hand, was Marcus Hale, younger then, crueler in his certainty. "Evening, Elias," Marcus had said casually. "You picked a real lonely place to live." Behind Marcus stood two other men, drifters, guns for hire, faces already half forgotten by the world. Elias reached for his rifle. Marcus was faster. The gunshot echoed like judgment. Elias went down hard, pain exploding through his shoulder. He remembered the snow turning red beneath him, remembered Marcus crouching close, speaking softly, almost kindly. "This is what happens when a man don't pay his debts," Marcus said. "Dry Creek don't forget what it's owed." Elias had screamed then, not for himself but for his son. Marcus had turned annoyed, and with a single, careless motion he had pushed Samuel backward into the fire that had already taken the cabin's edge. The scream that followed never left Elias. It lived in his bones. It followed him into every silence. By the time Elias dragged himself back to the ruins, the men were gone. The fire had eaten everything. There was nothing left to bury but ash and memory. That was the night Elias knelt beneath the open sky, blood soaking into the dirt, and made his vow. Back in the present, Elias opened his eyes to the crackle of firewood. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin something else raged too. Marcus Hale was alive, breathing, walking free beneath the same sky. God had not brought them together by accident. At dawn, Elias prepared. He cleaned his rifle with slow, reverent care. He packed food, ammunition, and rope. He did not rush. Revenge, he believed, was not about speed. It was about certainty. Before leaving, he stood before the wooden cross beside his door. He did not ask forgiveness. He asked strength, not to strike, but to finish what had been waiting too long. Below, in Dry Creek, Marcus Hale did not sleep well either. He drank late into the night, the saloon thick with smoke and false laughter. His men, new ones now, rough and eager, listened as Marcus spoke too loudly, trying to drown the unease crawling under his skin. "He's just a man," Marcus insisted. "A broken one?" But when the wind howled outside and the lanterns flickered, Marcus felt something close in around him. He had killed before? Many times. But some faces stayed with you. Some eyes followed you into the dark. By morning, Marcus had decided, he would not wait. By the time Elias descended from the mountain again, Dry Creek was already moving. Guns were being checked, horses saddled. Whispers passed from door to door. The sheriff, weak and afraid, chose not to see. He had survived this long by knowing when blindness paid better than courage. Elias felt it as soon as he crossed the tree line. The air was wrong. Too many tracks. Too many eyes hiding where they shouldn't. He smiled faintly. "So be it," he murmured. The first shot came from the ridge to his left. Elias dropped, rolling as the bullet tore through the air where his head had been. He came up firing once, clean and final. A man fell without a sound. The hunt had begun. Elias moved like the mountain itself, slow, unstoppable, knowing every path and shadow. One by one, Marcus's men disappeared into the trees, into ravines, into the cold hands of a man who had nothing left to lose. By afternoon, only Marcus remained. They met at the edge of the burned clearing where Elias's cabin had once stood. The past and present collapsed into one place. Marcus raised his gun, hands shaking now. "You could have stayed gone," he said. Elias stepped forward, eyes steady. "You should have been." Above them, the sky stretched wide and merciless, bearing witness once more. The wind slowed, as if the mountain itself was listening. Elias and Marcus stood facing one another in the blackened clearing where a home had once breathed with life. Ash still clung to the soil, stubborn as memory. The burned posts rose like gravestones, silent witnesses to a past that refused to stay buried. Marcus's gun trembled in his hand. "You don't have to do this," he said, though his voice betrayed him. It was not mercy he asked for, it was escape. Elias stepped forward once. His boots pressed into the ash, leaving clear, deliberate marks. "I already did this," he said quietly, "years ago. You're just catching up." Marcus swallowed hard. "That was business," he snapped, clinging to lies like driftwood. "Men die over business." Ilias's eyes darkened. "My son wasn't business." For a moment, Marcus raised his gun higher, desperation sharpening his breath. The shot rang out, but it went wide. Fear had stolen his aim. Elias did not rush. He lifted his rifle slowly, almost gently, as if offering Marcus time to understand what stood before him. "I carried you every day," Elias said. "In my sleep, in my prayers. I asked God why he let you live." Marcus laughed weakly. "And what did he say?" Elias exhaled. "Nothing." The silence answered instead. One shot clean, final. Marcus Hale fell backward into the ashes of a life he had destroyed, eyes wide with the realization that came far too late. The mountain took him without ceremony. Elias stood there long after, rifle lowered, shoulders heavy. There was no triumph, no relief, only a stillness so deep it almost hurt. He knelt where his cabin had once stood and pressed his hand to the ground. "It's done," he whispered, not to the dead but to the sky. Above him the clouds broke. Sunlight spilled across the clearing, warm and honest. For the first time in years, Elias felt the mountain breathe again. He rose, turned his back on the ashes, and walked away, not as a man chasing vengeance, but as one who had finally laid it down. Under God's endless sky, the oath was complete.